So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining it. And I'm here today. Thank you so much for the invitation from MBA-Exchange as well. I'm here today to share with you a little bit my path since I joined Siemens. So first of all, I am originally from Brazil. I studied engineering, and as pretty much all of the participants of the programs have. And I have joined Siemens after my MBA at Wharton, given the fact that I was looking for an assignment that had something that would combine an engineering requirement with an international exposure. So right after my studies in engineering in Brazil, I joined a consulting firm, and I realized that I liked the world of business, but at the same time, I didn't like some aspects of consumer goods or some types of industries that were, let's say, a little bit less engineering related. So going to Wharton, I decided I did not want to go back to that, but I wanted to continue my international career. Until then, I had pretty much lived and worked in Europe, in France, and also in Africa, in Morocco and South Africa. So I wanted to continue the global journey, but I also did not want a job that would simply allow me to do business trips. I wanted something that would really allow me to experience places. So send me to live for a limited time in a given country and allow me to really experience like the full package. So I did. And as you can see, throughout my assignments, I was in Germany, then I was in China and went back to Germany, then I went to Denmark, and then I exited the program at a job in Germany. And then most recently, 6 months ago, I got promoted to the position of Siemens CEO in Oman, which is just beside the UAE for those who never thought about it. Don't worry, I had never seen on the map either. What the program brought to me, it was a very big exposure to very different types of people. So as I mentioned to you, before I joined, I had worked in consulting. And I think especially like many of you hearing me right now may have had this experience. So in consulting, you end up working with very interesting people, but at the same time, like people tend to be somewhat homogeneous. Like everyone is extremely smart, extremely very analytical. So you don't really have the plethora of different personalities sometimes as you have at Siemens. So a company like Siemens, you're going to interact with like all sorts of types of people. So you have like brilliant engineers, but you also have people who work in factories. So they have like different skill sets. And that, I think, is the beauty. And that's when you learn the true meaning of collaboration. My main challenge throughout my assignments was probably the one when I was sent to China. So when I first arrived in China, I did not speak Chinese. I had decided that I wanted to live in China because I wanted to learn the language. But when I first got there, I did not speak it. And for sure, sometimes interacting with people, I was never really sure whether they were understanding me. If I would speak to them in English, and many times they are just very used to saying yes, yes. And I had this flavor of like, okay, am I being clear or not? By the end of the assignment, I could communicate a little bit in Chinese, but throughout like the first month, I always had this thing of like, I had to develop this feeling of how can I actually make sure that I'm interacting with people, I'm engaging them, and I'm getting my message across. And I think that was definitely like one of the biggest challenges I've had. And also, well, at my very last assignment, when I was in Denmark, probably my main point was I was sent to Denmark. I was working directly for the CEO of the business at the time. And in my assignment, I was supposed to be developing a strategy for spare parts, which is also called aftermarket. When I arrived there, I got to realize, like, first the CEO had told me, no one's doing this, you have to go there and set up your strategy and we're going to go forward with the business and so on. When I arrived there, I realized that there was a guy that had a plan. He had everything lined up. The only thing is that he had never managed to get his message across to management. So I kind of like had to figure out a way of not posing a threat to him or his career, figure out a way of leveraging his idea, and at the same time putting him on the spotlight and making him shine, given that he was the one who had been working on all these topics for almost 4 years. And I guess like that is like one very, very interesting point of being a mature manager is when you get to recognize people's talents and let them shine instead of trying to shine yourself. So for me, it was pretty much like instead of like trying to go there and reinvent the aftermarket, as it was a very initial task that I had, my main task or my main challenge that I took for myself was I have to find a way to simply make sure he's heard by top management. So anyway, so those were definitely my two highlights of my rotations. You can pretty much read on the slide what I've done in the other places. So my very first rotation, I was working on developing the first version of a software for our e-ticketing solution. That thing was discontinued a couple of years later. So this is why it was very interesting, just like to learn about the product management process and how you go about developing a new product, which was actually very useful in my last rotation when I was also acting as a product manager for refurbishment offerings. My second rotation, as I mentioned to you, I was in China doing a business development role. And my third rotation, I was in Germany analyzing whether it could make sense to have a mobile factory for wind power blades. And this is a very, very consulting type of assignment. So this is probably the one that taught me the least because I had my consulting experience before Siemens anyway. And if you ask me how all the assignments prepared me for the role I took over more recently on, I would say for sure the idea of learning to prove myself over and over again. So one thing I didn't tell you before is that between my MBA and Siemens, I actually ran my own company in Brazil for a couple of years. So I had already a little bit of this managerial experience of being the owner of something and being the main responsible person and being the person that everyone looks up to. Although here at Siemens, I have all of that with a lot of exposure and a lot of responsibility because I also carry the name of Siemens and I have to go to events and represent the company. So that is for sure very different. But the main point that I guess all the assignments helped me build is actually the confidence in myself and this idea of having to prove yourself is nothing bad.